Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Nick Danz, the Public Information Officer with Cobb County Fire and Emergency Services. And today I'm here with Fire Investigator Lee Maness and his dog Vinnie. In 2019, Cobb County Fire responded to 1,043 fires, and of those, 111 were investigated, and it resulted in 3 adult arrests and 2 juvenile complaints or arrests. And per the most recent FBI statistics nationwide, there were about 13.3 arson offenses for every 100,000 inhabitants. So we're here to talk about arson. And how long have you been an arson investigator?
I've been with the arson unit for about 3 years now. Before I was a arson investigator, I was a police officer, and in between being a police officer and an investigator, I was a firefighter. So altogether, I've got about 17 years experience with fire or investigations.
And tell us about the arson dog program. Like, how did that start, and where did this? Because this is the first one we've ever had in our 50-year history of Cobb Fire and Emergency Services.
Right, Vinnie is the first Cobb County arson dog, so it's kind of exciting. State Farm puts a program together about once a year now, where they're getting groups from all over America and Canada and supply dogs to main specialty dogs, and they get them trained up for accelerant detection. Over the course of the 9-month training, State Farm funds all the food for the dogs, all the training for the dogs, and then finds the handlers for the dogs. We get selected. There's usually about 10 people a year that get selected throughout the United States and Canada, and we go up for a month-long training. It's about 200 hours total, and it's 7 days a week. It's usually about 12 to 14-hour days. It's a really intense training schedule.
Awesome. Tell us a little bit about Vinnie. So, how old is he? What kind of breed of a dog? And tell us a little bit about.
Vinnie's a 2.5-year-old black lab. He might have a little something else in him besides black lab, but he's mostly black lab. Originally, Vinnie was slated to be a seeing eye dog for the blind, but he had a quirk where he doesn't like to stop at intersections, so he kind of didn't work out very well as a seeing eye dog. Okay. So he got repurposed and made his way up to Maine to be trained for an arson dog.
That's awesome. So we talked about, we're familiar with patrol dogs and drug dogs and bomb dogs and search dogs. So you mentioned accelerant detection. Explain a little bit about that. Like, what is an arson dog?
All right. Well, basically, he smells gasoline or anything with petroleum in it, petroleum distillates. And because gasoline is kind of in the middle of that, the way we train him, he can smell anything from a very low petroleum distillate to a very high petroleum distillate. So gasoline is the main thing that he trains on because it fits all those in the spectrum.
So he obviously can do what we can't as humans just by smelling something in the fire that we wouldn't necessarily be able to detect.
And even though we might smell gasoline when we walk into a room, we can't pinpoint it. And he can tell us where the most source of the gas is. We might be able to smell it, and he can tell us exactly. And the way he's trained is that he goes to the highest source, not that it was here and here. He goes to the place that has the most.
So how long has Vinnie been in training?
Before I got him, he had been trained for about 9 months, and I've had him for about 3 months now. So altogether, he's right at a year of arson training.
And you mentioned that it was a month long. There was pretty long hours, but what kind of is involved in those long hours? Are there different phases or modules?
We do lots of reps of a lot of different basic things to begin with. He's smelling gas in a can, and he's doing his alert, which for him an alert is sitting down, looking up. He salivates. He kind of makes a whiny noise. All those things, and some of them he can't control, they alert us on his alert of gasoline.
And there's a reward, right, for that alert?
There is. He only eats when he smells gas. And so he eats out of my hand when he smells gas, and he does his alert, his primary alert, he gets fed.
That's
so
awesome.
We train several times a day, sometimes up to 6 times a day we'll be training.
And you guys trained specifically for a month. He was 9 months before, and then you guys trained for a month together?
Right.
And that the training doesn't stop there. I mean, he continues he continues his training to keep his skills kind of up to date. What's that training schedule?
He trains just to eat. like he doesn't have a bowl that he eats out of. He eats out of my hand, and he only eats out of my hand when he smells gas. So we train daily, 6-7 times a day. Almost every single day we're doing that much.
Sure. How much does he eat? I mean, is that
Typical for him is maybe 3 cups a day, an average, but we'll have low days where he gets a half a cup for the whole day, and we'll have high days where he gets 5 cups in a day. And that's to keep his mind and his stomach kind of working against each other so that he has a drive to really want to find some accelerant.
It's kind of interesting to see the differences, obviously, between a working dog and just kind of your average pet who just eats out of a bowl. And
Right.
I never knew that they don't eat out of a bowl. That it's
Right.
literally their incentive for training is getting fed. That's awesome. So he seems pretty friendly, and I know that in my experience, whenever a dog is working, you don't necessarily want to pet the dog or pet the dog unsolicited or anything like that. Is that same thing kind of apply with arson dogs?
It absolutely applies. When we're on the scene and it's work time for him, and he's focused on what he's doing. But any kind of distraction by firefighters or police officers or whatever going on, if they're trying to distract him, he will be distracted.
Gotcha.
But if he's working and everybody's just going about their business, he's pretty good at staying focused. He's gonna come visit you now.
Hey,
Um,
hey, good boy.
The biggest thing about him is that when we're not working, he's absolutely approachable. You don't have to ask for my permission to pet him or any of that stuff. If we're not on a fire scene, he's not working, you can pet him. And he will jump up and try to give you love, but he's not going to be aggressive to you, and he's not going to hurt you any.
And so, even though you're a fire investigator and you carry a weapon and you have the same law enforcement capabilities, Vinny's not trained to that
No,
degree at all.
he probably wouldn't attack for anything.
Sure.
He doesn't have any training on anything except for accelerant detection.
And Vinny lives with you and your family, correct?
He does. He goes just about everywhere I go. Every step I make, he's pretty much right beside me. I've got a 10-year-old son, so they're like best buddies, and he sleeps in a crate downstairs, and that's his life.
What does Vinny do for fun?
Mostly lays on my foot and sleeps like this, but he likes to play Frisbee with my son in the yard. He'll run after Frisbees a lot. And chase him across the soccer field. He likes to chase my son across the
Nice.
soccer field.
Does Vinny have a girlfriend?
Not that we know of.
No?
But he's been fixed, so there won't be any little Vinnies running around.
And as far as the dog's career, obviously we have retirement time frames and stuff to do. Does the same apply for an arson dog? Does he have a length of service or time for his career? Or
Typically, for a working arson dog, 6 to 8 years will be about his working lifespan. He's about 2.5 years old now, so we're looking at about 10 years. He'll be about 10 years old when he retires.
and what's the plan once he retires?
He retires and comes home and just stays with me.
That's cool.
I've got about 10 years to go myself, so it might work out where we're retiring about the same time. And if not, he might come in to work with me even though he's retired. He might come in and just sit in my office with me.
That's awesome.
We'll figure that out in about 8 years.
Yeah, does he get a paycheck?
He does not get a paycheck. He does get his food and his veterinary stuff all taken care of by the county, but he does not make a paycheck.
So we'll work for food and housing. That's not a bad gig, Vinny. It's not a bad gig. So he hasn't been on the job very long, but he's already been involved in an arson investigation that resulted in a warrant. And tell us a little bit about that. We actually have a picture. Can you kind of explain a little bit about, kind of what the paint cans are for and how that process works?
Well, when we first get to a scene, we obviously can't just assume that something's an arson just because there's a fire. The first thing we're going to do once arson is suspected, they'll give me a call and I'll show up. And in this picture that's on the screen now, we have paint cans set up, and that's what we put our evidence into. So we're going to check these paint cans before any evidence is put inside them to make sure that they don't have any contaminants in them already, because we don't want to accuse somebody of starting a fire and having an accelerant when it could have been in the can and they're innocent. So we check the cans to make sure that they're fine to begin with. Once that's been established, we'll go in, we'll take the evidence, and we'll put them in the cans, and we'll have blank cans that don't have evidence in them, and we'll have the evidence cans, and I'll run him back through. If he makes a primary alert on the evidence that we collected, then we know we got a good sample. If he doesn't, then maybe we have to dig a little deeper. Sometimes there's fire debris 1.5 feet, 2 feet deep, and the gas is at the bottom of all that. So sometimes we just have to go back in, and we'll do that as many times as necessary to where he comes through, and if there's an accelerant in it, he detects it again. And once that happens, we seal the can up, and we send it off to the lab for testing.
So that's kind of that is the second process. Kind of initially, there's like a sweep, like a kind of a basic evidence sweep of whatever the scene is, and then how does that process work? So you first arrive on the scene, you and Vinny kind of walk around wherever the incident has occurred, and then what does that process look like?
Right. We'll get out. Like you said, we'll walk around the. Let's say if it's that house, we'll walk around the yard. We'll do a perimeter, just almost like just a walk around. It's not really even a focused sweep. If he alerts on something, we go with it. You know, if he smells something right away, I'm going to follow him to it. If not, we'll go and we'll just do a systematic check of everything in the house the way you would search anything. We're thorough with it, and we'll check as many places as we can get him to go to.
Good boy.
But
Good boy.
once he does smell an accelerant, he'll do his primary alert where he sits down, he looks at me, he salivates, he does the little grunty noise. I mean, all these things that he does in conjunction with his physical manifestations let me know that he smells it.
We've got a
probably
picture
does.
too. Vinny, can you see? Do you see yourself on the screen? So we've got a picture here, and this is a picture of Vinny actually alerting in a simulated fire scene.
Right. Actually, that is a real fire scene. We were up in Maine, and they had just had that scene about a month before we got there. They had a big fire at this house, and this is one of the remaining rooms that was left over. While we were in that scene, we had just walked by that window, and where he's sitting, there's gasoline right below that window. So that was his first alert for me in a real scene after we'd been training for about, 3 weeks. That was the first alert on a real scene that he sat and did everything perfectly. And it was really nice to have the photographer, Heather, who's part of State Farm's program. It was nice to have her there taking the pictures and documenting it.
Yeah, good boy. So he's got his first warrant in the books, and you guys are going to continue doing some training, and we're actually going to show a clip here of you guys doing some training. So kind of walk us through how you do the training now to keep him ready for when an incident occurs.
Okay, so the scenario that we're having here, I'm going to put floor drops down, which is basically 50% weathered gasoline, and I'll take the weathered gasoline and I'll drop it in a spot or two throughout the room. Sometimes I'll have an actual burned out room. If I'm lucky enough to have a good fire scene, I'll do it in a burned out room. But sometimes I'll do it in a room that doesn't have fire, because sometimes arsons never get lit. The fire doesn't happen, or a room doesn't light off the way it's supposed to, and there's unburned gas. So in this scenario, I'm putting some drops down. I'll change out his collar, and that's kind of an indication to him, hey, it's time to work. And I'll put on my food belt, and when he sees that food belt and he smells the food, he knows it's time to work.
Sure.
He gets in that mode, and then we'll say our magic word, which is SEEK. We're not going to say that right now, but we say that word, and that lets him know, okay, I'm looking. And we'll go around. Usually we'll go clockwise in a room, because it's easier to direct. He's always in my left hand, so it's easier to direct with my right hand, and he's going to find the spot where I put the gasoline. His primary alert is to sit down. He sits down, he looks at me, he grunts, he salivates. I tell him he's a good dog. If he's on where he's supposed to be, I tell him he's a good dog. I roll towards him, and I reach in and give him some food.
That's awesome.
And then we go through the process again several times. We'll do that. He's made friends with you.
Yeah.
We'll do that several times during one training evolution. We might do it 10 times on one spot. So if there are 3 spots I put down, we'll do it 10 times on each of them. Okay. So he might get 30 handfuls of food, which it might just be a kibble or two, every time. Or we might do one spot somewhere and he gets a lot of food at one time. And sometimes we'll go in rooms and we won't have any gas. Sometimes we'll go and we'll make a dry run just to make sure that he's staying honest with me, because he does try to lie to me sometimes because he wants to get fed.
Sure.
He'll sit down and he's got a little tail where if he's lying to me, he'll move. When I say seek again, he'll move.
Gotcha.
Oh, I said it out loud. But
He
anyways.
didn't get it. So
He's all right.
let's talk about kind of what's a shift like for you guys. Like, what is a day in the life of a working dog? How does that work?
Typically, he comes to the office with me in the morning. Any fires that went out over the night that were suspicious a little, or maybe we got called out in the middle of the night, somebody else in the unit got called out, and they said, well, we'll run the dog through tomorrow. So gives the time for the scene to cool down, to quit off-gassing. I mean, he smells the same things that we put on SCBAs for, so we can't walk him through a hot scene. We'll go and we'll check it out. If we find something, then we're starting the whole evidence collection routine, the cans, the double checking, triple checking, digging, everything that has to be done with him, we start that routine. Then we'll go and we'll get warrants sometimes, or we'll send the evidence off to collect to the laboratory. It just it depends on what it is that we're doing with him.
So typical kind of 8 to 5 schedule or on-call schedule as well? Or?
6:30 to 2:30 is our normal working hours, but he's on call pretty much 24 hours a day.
Okay.
If my boss deems it necessary to have a dog there, then I'm going. And we've got a pretty decent schedule worked out on how to make that happen and not consume every second of my life.
Sure.
So it works out.
That's great. And then once kind of COVID cools down a little bit, I'm sure there'll be some opportunities for, public events and things like that. So I know he tends to steal the show a little bit wherever he goes. So I know there'll be an opportunity kind of later on to be able to do some things like that for the public. So we appreciate you coming out. We appreciate you bringing Vinny out here. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Vinny's personal Instagram page, so that you can follow his updates. We look forward to a long, healthy career for both of you guys.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah.